Hey everyone, quick break to tell you about something I've been working on. Here's a stat that stops most advisors cold. Research shows advisors don't usually get fired for bad performance, they get fired for bad communication. You already know you should be reaching out to clients more consistently. It's just finding the time to write something worth sending. So I'm here to help, and I built something to fix that. 26 to 30 advisor-ready newsletters and topic-based bundles, professionally written, enough to send your clients regularly for an entire year. There's no market commentary, no recycled cliches, just real behavioral finance, the psychology, the meaning, the decision-making, the stuff that actually helps clients think and behave like better investors. Make them your own, hit send, and you're done. You're not just filling an inbox, you're reinforcing your value between meetings and building real trust. To learn more and to buy yours, check them out at orionbefi.com. That's orionbefi.com. And if you have any more questions about this, reach out to me at daniel.crosby@orion.com. Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and I am joined today from across the pond by Adam Cockerham, who is a chartered financial planner and financial well-being advocate with extensive experience helping individuals, families, and businesses navigate complex decisions. In his new book, which is fantastic, Your Money and Your Mind, he argues that our financial lives are shaped as much by our beliefs, identity, and relationships with money as by spreadsheets and investment returns. A message I can get behind. Welcome to the show.
Daniel, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
We were just talking about how hot it is. It's like 88 Fahrenheit over there. It's like 95 here, but we've got better air conditioning. So I don't know which I'd prefer. Nah, never mind. I do know which I'd prefer. I'll take the AC every day.
Yeah, I'll take your position any day of the week.
All right. Well, congrats on the book. The book is fantastic. It's another sort of brick in the wall of creating this beautiful house of human first finance. So it's a very necessary. Excited to have you here today. Early in the book, you basically say, hey, money's great, but why do we want it? And I think most books aren't that philosophical. Most finance books don't dig that deep. This is a deep and a unique question. Do you believe that most people have a money problem or a meaning problem that money reveals?
It's a great question. It's one I loved exploring in it. I'm not sure many people have a money problem. There are some who do, and that's absolutely true, and we should not diminish the importance of those who do. Although I will always maintain that even during financial hardship, I don't think obsessing over the lack of resource and the lack of money brings about its existence, but that's a conversation for another time, and it's certainly one that's worth exploring. But what money is absolutely fantastic at is allowing us to exercise some deeper meaning and fulfillment in our lives. And without answering that question, it has a danger of becoming the goal itself. And the way the world of money works and commerce works and economic theory works is that more is usually better. But without some underlying meaning pinned to that, it becomes this self-perpetuating chasing mechanism that you never truly satisfy. And I've seen that in the work I do with individuals and businesses a lot, because there's a lack of satisfaction, and those who get to some objective measure of wealth aren't always suddenly satisfied and free from it. So the problem is money is so ubiquitous that we all share our common use of it, is that it has a danger of becoming the measuring mechanism that we use for our well-being and overall achievement. But the meaning behind it is a very subjective individual pursuit, and money can't give us that. That's something we have to exercise at an individual level.
So if you if you saw someone trying to solve a meaning problem with money, because I'm with you. I think a lot of people try and do this. They use it as a proxy because it's easy to count, it's easy to measure, it's easy to keep score with money in a way that it's not. To talk about, your relationship with self or others, or your level of self-fulfillment or self-actualization is not as easy to see as your bank account. What would be some signs that someone is trying to solve a meaning problem with money? And then what would you counsel them to do instead if they saw this in themselves?
Great question. So often you will see people so as a financial planner, a goal and an objective I can come across sometimes is a numerical value. It may be over here, I want my pension pot to get to £1 million. And that may be a numerical objective of somebody's, but unless you press hard on what that £1 million represents and why they want it, often they don't have an answer. So I don't think the external world, the out there, the numerical figure can really answer that question. You need to prod somebody into some internal process of figuring out the deeper meaning and the value system that they have, and then work backwards to the money side of it to truly understand what figure it is that actually needs to serve that purpose. If you start on the opposite way around, then that's where that problem comes about.
Yeah. In chapter 12, the title of chapter 12 is Financial Freedom. And, you also talk, though, about freedom as being freeing ourselves from financial media, freeing ourselves from comparison, freeing ourselves from a scarcity mindset. And it got me thinking, when we talk about financial freedom here, at least in the States, I feel like that's usually attached to a number, right? Like, I'll be financially free when I hit X. And we have all these funny terms to go along with it, skinny fire, fat fire, coast fire, all these funny terms. But reading your book sort of reoriented my thinking, and it led me in the direction of thinking that, financial freedom may have less to do with a number, like a specific dollar amount, and more to do with our internal relationship to money. So with all that as a preamble, how do you define financial freedom?
I think financial freedom has been, we've confused it a lot with external parameters. And I can understand how that's come about, because when you consume a lot of content or you compare yourself to peers, then suddenly the idea of freedom and security is pinned to a number, or not having to work ever again because there's enough money to cover everything you need. But to me, financial freedom, and the more I've seen this anecdotally with clients I work with, is far more about feeling free, and therefore being free because you feel it, rather than a specific point in time or numerical value that you must achieve to give you it. So to give you an example, some of my wealthiest clients who have multiple millions, no need to ever work again, the money is still some cause of anxiety for them, and it still gives rise to these anxious experiences in their daily lives. So to me, that's not financial freedom. That's lots of money with no freedom. So there's a huge part of it that's missing. And I think feeling free has to be an internal exercise.
Yeah.
I worked with people who I have, the numbers don't add up, and I have to tell them it's never a great meeting, but I have to tell them you've probably got to work for the next 10 years, and you've got to do this for that number for you never to have to work again. But because they're extremely happy and fulfilled in how they're spending their days, they feel completely free during that 10-year process. So who's financially free? The millionaire who finds their relationship with money difficult, even though they're not working and don't have to, or the person who gets up every day feeling fulfilled for 8 hours, and then I'm not sure that it's as black and white as how much money you have and whether you need to work again.
I've been working on a book on finding meaning and purpose in life, and one of the concepts that I've been playing with in that book is freedom from and freedom to. And I think a lot of times when we talk about financial freedom, we're talking about freedom from, freedom from the less dignified parts of our 9 to 5, right? Like endless meetings and, expense reports and whatever sort of obnoxious thing you have about your job. That stuff sucks, and it's nice to be free of it, right? So there is something to that. But then I think fewer people answer the question of freedom to, like, okay, so freedom to do what? Like you've hit your number. Now, what causes are you going to support? Who are you going to spend your time, blessing their lives? Who do you want to surround yourselves with? What kind of ideas do you want to put in your head? How do you want to spend your time? So I think there's a tension, and I think human nature being what it is, we tend to over-index on that freedom from. We want to free ourselves from the chains of those things that we don't like. And I think we spend less time thinking about that meaning. Continuing to pull on this thread, one of the recurring themes in the book is around sort of loosening our grip on money and the grip that money has on us. It put me in mind of Fight Club. The things that we own end up owning us. And it occurred to me while reading your book that at some point the same thing is true of wealth, right? At some point, wealth stops being something we possess and it can become something that possesses us. It can become sort of the whole of our self-worth or the whole of how we identify. Again, what are some questions that money has moved from sort of servant to master in someone's life, and what would you have them do to right that ship?
Yes, to simplify it as well, although it can get quite deep and abstract. So for the purpose of your listeners, I'll try, if they want to get into all that, then that's fantastic. It will be great. But if you can't answer the question, what's it all for? Then suddenly your pursuit of money or your interactions with it it's a sign that it's the pursuit of money for money's sake is possibly the objective. And that's where this relationship with it and lack of meaning can often come about. So I would always start with the what's it all for question. Sometimes I've written recently that I would love, if it wasn't so unprofessional, just to say to a client when I first see them, who the hell are you? Mm-hmm. So, the question, who am I? What do I value? Is this really this introspective question and answer session you have with yourself could start to paint a picture of what sort of pursuit is relevant to you, if that makes sense?
I want to, we have a lot of advisors that listen to the show. I want to challenge an advisor to just abruptly say, who the hell are you, to a client, and then in their next meeting, and see how it goes. I'm not convinced it's a bad idea. Like I'm not convinced it's a bad idea, because I think outside of money, I read some of these blogs and folks who are very public with their net worth, and it seems that very often, oh, I'm the $5 million man or the $5 million woman or the, whatever. And it's like, oh, that's so boring. Being a millionaire or a billionaire or whatever, like that's such a boring thing to be. Who the hell are you? We have to answer that question outside of money and let the money serve that mission and not let the money become the mission.
I couldn't agree more. And I think if you don't want to ask the question, who the hell are you? Then I think the question, what makes you tick, often goes quite well, because it takes it away from this idea of financial objectives and more life objectives first. Financial objectives are a means of which we exercise that. And I think that's the piece that, well, I think it's becoming more relevant now and it's growing, which is absolutely fantastic. But I think that piece has been missing for a long time.
So my next question is around scarcity. This is something I've observed really repeatedly, and you've even made mention of it today in our conversation. It seems like scarcity is hard to kill. And there are many, many people who are by any measure wealthy and set up for flourishing, never have to work again, financially independent in the numerical sense, if not the philosophical sense. And yet they still seem to operate with this scarcity mindset. And in fact, I've seen some of the richest people I know operate with a massive scarcity mindset. Where does that come from, and what do you think is to be done about it?
I think there's two avenues of inquiry here. There's one is hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. The fight or flight mentality, this idea of scarcity. And, you've got economic theory points towards scarcity and lack of abundance and all that sort of thing. So I think that's one very appropriate line of inquiry. But the one I'm far more interested in is this idea that the scarcity mindset, if you've had that all your life, you've been taught it as a child, you've been taught it in school, you've been taught it in textbooks, then that knowledge finds its way into your thinking patterns. Somehow, I don't know, I'm not the expert, but somehow your thought patterns will use preconditioned thinking and just manifest over time. So the same patterns of thinking will, even if you've achieved all the money in the world, this idea of scarcity, if your thinking is that way, will always permeate through your life. So unless we're intentional about working our minds and exercising them to bring about new patterns of thinking, then it's always going to be the same. Of course it is. That makes total logical sense to me. So if you want to change the shape of your body, you've got to do something with it, haven't you? That's just a fact of life. It's got to move in one form or another to bring that about. And what I will always argue for is our minds also need that same amount of exercise, however you go about it, but training it, spending time with it, observing your own thoughts, allow other thoughts to emerge, which may give rise to fresh thinking. And suddenly this idea of imminent scarcity or risk or shortfall may start to abate a little bit.
I'm very imperfect in my execution of this, but one of the biggest...
As am I, by the way.
Yeah. One of the biggest changes I've tried to make in the last few years is to move from a scarcity to an abundance mindset with respect to other people's success. When you see someone, in your field or in your line of work who's having more success than you, just being happy for them and seeing a sense of what's possible for you as well, instead of comparing yourself or thinking that this is to your detriment. I don't have any great shortcuts for that, except that I've tried to embrace that mindset, and I've been a lot, when I'm able to, I'm a lot happier. Speaking of that, one of my favorite findings from my book, The Soul of Wealth, was talked about the importance of reference class. Talked about the importance of who you compare yourself to and sort of the personal index, the personal benchmark you use when you're benchmarking your own life and your own success. It's never been easier for us to make negative social comparisons, right? I follow on Instagram, some of the richest people in the world. On any given day, I can open my phone and see people with better hair, better abs, bigger bank account, whatever, than me. The finding from my book that I shared was that your level of wealth is as predictive of your felt wealth as your reference class. So, who you compare yourself to is literally as important to you feeling wealthy as the actual dollars in your bank account. Like, it's just massively important. And it's never been easier to get that wrong. How do you counsel people to try and make positive social comparisons when it's so easy to feel bad about ourselves?
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's two routes really. You can change your frame of reference. So often, like I say this with, a common parental thing that a lot of people do, and I do with my kids sometimes, is like you don't know how lucky you are, so you change your frame of reference down, if you like, to show how up you are. But then if your frame of reference goes up, then you're in danger of having this insignificance feeling about yourself and where you're heading in life. So what I argue for in the book really is to almost do away with that and practice non-attachment to external outcomes that to some extent are beyond your control, because there's a lot of luck involved in it, right? You can exercise your life plan perfectly, but without a fair wind and a bit of luck, it could get, just like the universe at large, could behave completely randomly. So I like this idea of finding contentment as an internal exercise rather than looking externally for the verification. And I think that's where the danger comes in, because as you rightly point out, it has never been easier to pick up your phone and either feel brilliant or insignificant. I just don't think the answer lies there, although it's a helpful mental hack, I would say, to change your frame of reference. It is helpful, and it reminds you, for the most part, particularly the people in your audience listening, how lucky we are to live in Western civilization, full stop. But it will only ever be fleeting because it's not grounded in an internal, it's not rooted in your internal space. It's looking externally again, just like we do with money, to find some form of peace. And I think it needs moving from the inside out rather than the outside in. And that's what I've attempted. The world will tell me whether I've done it or not, but that's what I'm exploring at the moment.
Your book talks a lot from a Buddhist perspective. It talks a lot from a philosophical perspective about loosening attachment and embracing uncertainty. But of course, the evolutionary psychologist, the armchair evolutionary psychologist in me, I should say, knows that is hard to do. So for people looking to do these things, right? For people looking to loosen attachment, what are the practical means by which we can bring that about?
The problem with this is that it's all these things are quite subjective. So what works for one may not work for another. But for me personally, just exploring some of the deeper questions in life, looking at wisdom from global cultures has really helped me, as has meditation. It helped me overcome a lot of my own mental health problems. I've not been exempt from that journey myself. But for some, it's just getting into this point where we're able to observe our own thoughts emerging. So whatever it is, some people go for a run, some people listen to their favorite music, and it just helps recenter us back into the present moment. Now, as long as whilst we're doing that, we're just able to observe thoughts come and go, what it can do is separate you a little bit, the intrinsic you, your essence, if you like, from the person or the thing chattering away in your mind. And it's an iterative process of just thinking, I'm not perfect at it at all. I fumble and fall quite a lot with this sort of thing. But over time, it just creates a little bit more space, and the more you do it, the more space you get. And I think it's really helpful for when we're dealing with our finances or dealing with the outside world, that we have that ability to ground ourselves in that moment and not take our thoughts too seriously and identify them with them too much. I don't know if that answers your question, but you've got to point to it rather than actually use language to explain it. It's quite difficult.
Yeah. So further to that, the CFA Institute actually has a really great series on meditation. And when I think when you see a body as august and practical as the CFA Institute talking about meditation, you know that maybe we're on to something. So last question for you here. Wittgenstein famously was asked, what people could do to make life better. And he said, spend more time in graveyards. And I love that answer, because when you do spend time in graveyards, you see this difference between, what we call resume values and eulogy values, right? I mean, your resume values are, increased sales by 25% quarter over quarter. Your eulogy values are, beloved son, loving father, kind neighbor, things like that. Your book talks a lot about mortality and uncertainty and death and, all these heavy things. How can contemplating death, contemplating our own mortality, make us better investors and better stewards of our wealth?
Well, I think so good. That quote's brilliant. If spend more time in graveyards, and I think another one that I quite like to use is, use your last breath test. So when you take your last breath, has this helped towards this idea of what a great life that was, or has it one of those things where I probably wasted some time and energy in that space? Now, it's never going to be perfect, of course it's not. But I think facing your own mortality doesn't have to be this miserable existential exercise, but it is an existential exercise for sure, but it doesn't have to be a miserable one. And I think it just reminds us that we don't truly own anything. We're here for a finite amount of time, and our existence on planet Earth just reminds us, and facing the end of it probably allows us to become more present and seize the opportunity that we have available. And when we're talking about finance, it's how we allocate our resources and how we use them and how we bring them to life. And knowing it's all going to end at some point and that's it, none of this really matters from an individual level, it probably just takes the edge off, but still allows you to plan for the future moments that you have. And I think that's the balance that I like to call for, really.
So last thing I'll say here, kind of goes back to our who are you question to shock people out of their complacency. I wrote a children's book, believe it or not, called Everyone You Love Will Die. And it's free. It's intentionally provocative. And it's a poem that my friend illustrated. And the closing stanza is, yes, everyone you love will die, but you're here today and so am I. Book's available for free on Amazon. Go grab it. Read it with someone you love and bum them out. But no, I think it's a great message. And I think Wittgenstein was on to something that as it's so easy to get wrapped up in the moment, right? It's so easy to get wrapped up in the frenetic pace of a moment. It's so easy to get wrapped up in trying to maximize those resume values. But I think when we take a step back, we realize how fleeting all